Thanks for tuning in to the Jurassic Park-Cast, the Jurassic Park podcast, where guests chat with me about Michael Crichton's 1990 novel Jurassic Park. Also not that too. Big shout out to Christoph Oakes of Snail, and a big thank you to him for letting me use his band's music to score this podcast. You can find his music on Spotify and Bandcamp. Today's intro is from the song Centipede, and our outro is Super Groovy from Snail's debut album, Snail. Alright, please hear this clip from episode 47, The Park, where we dispel a frog DNA misunderstanding readers might have about the Tyrannosaur. And then we get into the now famous Tyrannosaurus River Scene from the novel that's getting so much attention thanks to Jurassic World Rebirth. But first, the Amphibian Visual Cortex. Here's an excerpt from episode 47.
Our first paper looks to understand with some further depth what the heck Dr. Grant is talking about with the Amphibian Visual Cortex. So I dug up a paper published in the Proceedings of the IRE, Volume 47, issue number 11 from November 1959, What the Frog's Eye Tells the Frog's Brain. This paper analyzed the activity of single fibers in the optic nerve of a frog to find out what sort of stimulus causes the largest activity in one nerve fiber, and then what is the exciting aspect of that stimulus, such that variations in everything else cause little change in the response. The assumption for frogs, according to the paper, quote, has always been that the eye mainly senses light, whose local distribution transmitted to the brain is copied by a mosaic of impulses. They assumed that the nervous apparatus in the frog's eye was devoted to detecting certain patterns of light and their changes corresponding to particular relations in the visible world. To analyze their assumption, they presented a frog with a wide range of visible stimuli, not only spots of light, but things a frog would be disposed to eat, other things from which it would flee, sundry geometrical figures, stationary and moving about, etc. Lots of different things. Their conclusions say, the operations of a frog's eye have, quote, much more the flavor of perception than a sensation, if that distinction has any meaning now. That is to say that the language in which they are best described is the language of complex abstractions from the visual image. We have been tempted, for example, to call the convexity detectors bug perceivers. Such a fiber responds best when a dark object, smaller than a receptive field, enters the field, stops, and moves about intermittently thereafter. The response is not affected if the light changes or if the background, say a picture of grass and flowers, for example, is moving, and is not there if only the background, moving or still, is in the field. Could one better describe a system for detecting an accessible bug? Is what they say. So the Amphibian Visual Cortex, as described by Grant, mimics the findings of this old paper, that visually, one using this visual system, here it's Tyrannosaurs and Myosaurs, and in the paper it's frogs, responds best when a dark object smaller than a receptive field enters the field, stops, and moves about intermittently thereafter. Grant weaponizes his interpretation to jam a dinosaur's visual cortex by disrupting their visual interpretations. Thus, while he's a dark object smaller than the receptive field that's entered the field and stopped, he resists moving about intermittently thereafter, and according to science, becomes invisible.
So, during the Tyrannosaurus attack, as well as the Myosaur experience in the chapter The Park, this chapter, dinosaurs have an amphibian visual cortex, which reads as a very primitive sensory organ. Some dinosaurs will forget you're there if you quit moving, like the Myosaur did, and others cannot see unmoving objects, like the Tyrannosaurus. This isn't true, of course, for real dinosaurs, but for the purposes of crafting an interesting story, Crichton makes this an observation only our paleontologist hero would know. So, the amphibian visual cortex was cleverly implemented by Crichton to give us a scientist hero that relies on dinosaurs having very primitive sensory organs. It's not true to science, but it does demonstrate the qualities of a good writer. And as Ellie Sattler muses later on, quote, what better person to get them safely through Jurassic Park than a dinosaur expert? All right, moving on. This second excerpt contains all kinds of details of all the literary tricks Crichton used to make the Tyrannosaurus in the river scene so memorable. So have a listen.
This week's text is The Park, spanning from pages 260 to 268. In a synopsis, Grant, Lex, and Tim scare away a Myosaur, climb down the tree, and head back to the maintenance shed to get a raft to float down the jungle river. Grant and the kids find a tranquilizer gun and head to the dock at the lagoon. But the big Rex is there, sleeping, so they sneak into the raft, but Lex blows their getaway by coughing, awakening Big Rex and having her swim after them. Characters: Lex Murphy Lex reveals she cannot swim on page 263 and hopes that they can, quote, catch some fish while they're riding in this raft. That's what she wants to do. Sometimes kids just say stupid stuff. This isn't so crazy, but Crichton is making her about as obnoxious as possible, perhaps as she's getting hungrier, right? So she's getting cranky. She's hangry, is what they say. Lex is not comfortable with walking to the raft in front of the big Rex on 265, and in fact, she's pale with fear, we're told, and refuses to move, and one might say she is petrified, pun intended. Despite Lex's reservations, she is forced into the raft, and then childishly, inconceivably, she lets out a great loud sigh of relief, which is worrisome enough to wake the Tyrannosaur, but then finds that she must suppress a cough. Apparently, she always has to cough at the wrong times. Then she panics greatly and is apologetic as the Tyrannosaur swims up to them, and she panics and screams, basically just yelling everything that comes to her mind as the big Rex snaps at them. And then, when they get a stroke of fortune, it returns to the shore to protect its hadrosaur carcass, and she misinterprets their incredible stroke of luck as her getting the best of the Tyrannosaur, and then she taunts it. Tim Murphy. Tim chirps up that he spotted a raft in the maintenance building earlier and suggests that they use that to navigate through the park more quickly. And turns out he hadn't actually seen a raft, but for some reason assumed that there was a raft. Tim discovers a metal case with the compressed air pistol and cloth belt on 263, which is great because it arms Grant and the kids to defend themselves. And Tim appears to be the point of view character who observes that Lex always has to cough at the wrong times on 265. And to help her, he scoops some lagoon water to help relieve the tickle in her throat. I don't think anybody's going to drink that water, though. Dr. Alan Grant. And Grant loves the idea of taking the raft instead of going over land. Now, Grant can't find the raft right away, but does find a set of schematics or plans in a cabinet on 263. Grant studies these plans for, quote, a long time, so we shall accept that he knows exactly where to go and what to do by virtue of looking at these plans. Now, these aren't, quote, plans, but rather topographical charts for the main area of the island, where they are now. He makes a plan to get to the lagoon, discovers a service road that's, quote, below ground level, leading straight to the lagoon, leading to another dock where the raft is stored. And Tim gives Grant a tranquilizer gun, and he leads them down to the docks on 264. Reaching the dock, Grant must walk in full view of the big Rex to the end of the dock to get the raft ready for the kids, hoping that the Tyrannosaur won't wake up. Lex is stubborn and really frustrates Grant, but he gets her into the raft, and they launch. He tries to stay in the center of the lagoon where it is deepest, and in a last-ditch effort, fires the dart gun into the Tyrannosaur's cheek on 267. When the big Rex leaves them to defend its carcass, Grant rows as hard as his body allows, collapsing in exhaustion, and falls asleep. And the Tyrannosaur returns in this chapter. Big Rex comes back on 263. She's chilling this time. And by chilling, I don't mean scary. She's just hanging out. She's sitting upright in the shade of a tree, its hind legs stretched out in front. And I need to see an artist's rendition of this moment. Her eyes are open, but she doesn't move except for her head, which rises and falls gently with each snorting sound. The constant buzzing is from a cloud of flies surrounding her, crawling over her face, and bloody fangs. She is sleeping, sitting up. I guess with her eyes open. All the flies bother Big Rex while she sleeps, and Crichton says she, quote, raised its forelimb to swipe at the flies buzzing around its snout on 265. It burps and dozes away, and it, quote, scratches behind its ear with its hind foot just like a dog on 266. When it awakens, it lumbers into the lagoon, swims like a crocodile, and snaps at the boat, just missing on its first attempt on 267. Then Grant shoots it in the cheek with the Morrow 709, and it hears the juvenile Rex at the shore creeping on her hadrosaur kill. Well, nuts to that, the big Rex goes back to defend its carcass, abandoning her attack on the raft. This behavior was described earlier in the novel, recall way back in episode 29, Big Rex, or on pages 148 and 149, where Big Rex has killed the goat and appears cautious or worried that another Tyrannosaur may come and snatch it away from her. So the Tyrannosaurs don't really square off, but the juvenile is sufficiently scared away, and the Big Rex keeps its kill on 268. At least the juvenile got a sample of the carcass, so it's eaten a little bit after eating Regis. The dock. This is a concrete dock on 263, and it is connected to the sauropod maintenance shed by a below-ground road, which we were just talking about. The Tyrannosaur is propped up against a tree only 20 yards from the dock. Recall, this is 3 strides for a Tyrannosaur to walk. A wooden shed painted green to resemble the surrounding foliage is at the end of the dock with a latch on the door. Inside are a half-dozen orange life vests hanging on the wall, several rolls of wire mesh fencing, some coils of rope, and 2 big rubber cubes on the floor. And the cubes are strapped tight with rubber belts. And the lagoon. It's 100 feet wide at this particular spot on 267. And apparently it is deepest at the center and becomes more shallow towards the shore. We did learn earlier that it is stocked with fish. We're not told what kind of fish, so we don't know if it's freshwater or saltwater, but probably freshwater. Exiting north out of the lagoon, there is a current pulling the raft on 268, which is specifically addressed. It's carrying them toward the hotel, so this is a good thing. For a current to be pulling them north, it must indicate that they are flowing downhill towards a larger body of water or out into the ocean. And in any case, this must indicate that they are topographically descending in altitude by the nature of how water flow works, even though they're heading north towards the visitor center, which we are basically told is in the mountains of the northern part of the island earlier. All right, allusions and references. Jack and the Beanstalk. You let me know if I'm wildly out of line on this part. As Grant and the kids are sneaking past the sleeping Tyrannosaurus in this chapter, looking to get onto the raft, does this not remind you a whole lot of Jack and the Beanstalk? Like the tale of Jack and the Beanstalk, Jack has to sneak past the sleeping giant with his treasures under his arm. Now, I think he has a goose that lays the golden eggs, and there might be a harp of some sort. So he's got these things he's got to sneak by. And then Big Rex in this reference is the giant. It, quote, grunted and snorted on page 265. It shifts its ponderous bulk, and it settles back against a tree trunk with a, quote, long growling belch. It burps. And when it wakes up, it, quote, yawned lazily and scratched behind its ear with its hind foot just like a dog. Yawned again. It was groggy after its big meal, and it woke up slowly. We're told on 266. It stumbles to its feet because it's clumsy and tired for now. And I think the sleeping Rex that burps and swats at flies while it's sleeping in this, let's be totally clear, in this absolutely ridiculous position sitting up against a tree, this is comical, right? This is childish. It's kids' TV programming. And Grant is sneaking by with his dart gun trying to get Lex and Tim aboard a raft so that they can get down the river. And Lex is, though they don't mention it, creeping by, and she's carrying her baseball glove. And Tim is still toting along the night vision goggles, and they tiptoe like they're characters in Looney Tunes or something like that. So this whole scene just reminds me of, like, yeah, a children's story. Stylistic techniques, we have italics. Hey, what's that? On 261 is another example of Lex emphasizing what she sees. Obviously a character who speaks with great emphasis and emotion because she is a child. I'm not walking out there anymore. On 262 insists Lex. Again, emphasis showing her frustrating stubbornness and childishness. The Tyrannosaur was right there on 263. And here the italics emphasize incredible emotion, astonishment, surprise, fear, terror, and you name it. They're feeling it really strongly because there are italics. Grant nodded yes in italics on 265, as the italics here demonstrate perhaps the exaggerated motions one might make to be understood whilst being silent. So that's kind of fun. She always coughed at the wrong times! Exclamation mark. On 265 appears to be Tim's observation with a history between them where she's frustrated him with this quirk before. The always suggests that she's innocent of any wrongdoing. This is just something that happens. Lex, shut up! On 266, he's just saying what we're all thinking. But seriously, desperate times have led to decorum and civility to lose priority. Tim isn't being mean here, he's desperate. And the italics, the exclamation mark, the uncouth language toward his sister, it all adds up to they need her to listen now. Be quiet. And there's lots of italics in these desperate moments, especially as Tim calls his sister an idiot quite a bit. Most notably, there's a concept that apparently it is obvious that all reptiles, snakes, and tyrannosaurs can swim quite well. And you're an idiot if you don't know that. What are you doing? On 267, screams Lex, uncertain why Grant is swinging the boat around, heading towards the Tyrannosaur. Again, she may be the most italicized and exclamatory character, which says something on a greater level. She's, for all intents and purposes, the least mature character, and thus, via Crichton's deployment of his characters, the one least in control of her emotions. The more italics and exclamations a character uses, the more perhaps we should read them as being less mature, or behaving immaturely anyhow. From now on, will you do what I tell you? Asks Grant, and Lex responds, okay, in the most tone-deaf moment of the novel, as if she didn't just almost get them all eaten by not listening. And to be more tone-deaf than Hammond in this novel is saying something. That's Lex. Collins, quote, it took him a moment to realize, the Tyrannosaur was asleep. On 263, the introduction of a realization is presented before the colon, which then states the realization. So perhaps not my favorite use of a colon in the novel so far, but it works just fine. She mouthed, no boat, in italics. On 265, as this colon presents what Lex is mouthing, which is no boat, and that's stated in italics because she must be especially animated or insistent that she will not walk into the open in front of the Tyrannosaur to climb into this raft. Her body shook with muffled sounds, she was suppressing a cough. On 265, here the colon introduces a behavior and then explains what is causing that behavior. He knew what that meant, a tickle in her throat. On 265 is the same setup again. Lex pointing at her throat silently is explained post-: she has a tickle in her throat. M-. Then Grant realized the animal wasn't swimming, but was walking, because moments later only the very top of the head, M-, the eyes and nostrils, M-, protruded above the surface. On page 266. And these M-dashes serve as parentheses, so the explanation that the eyes and nostrils are protruding above the surface is to be read simultaneously with the rest of the sentence. Grant looked at the paddles in his hands, but they were light plastic. M-, not weapons at all. On 267, where the M- here serves as an informal semicolon. He saw bubbles, M-, then a faint ripple along the surface, M-, coming towards the boat, M-. On 267 again, here the M-dashes should serve as an interruption, so each new observation is interrupting the preceding observation. Perhaps this should be read as an escalating situation, which indication of a predating Tyrannosaur approaching your boat is an escalation, if I ever heard of one, so this probably works out. It looked pitifully small in his hands, but there was the chance that if he shot the animal in a sensitive spot, in the eye or the nose, M-. On 267, but the Tyrannosaur resurfaces and interrupts his feeble anti-Tyrannosaur planning. The response was immediate, M-. It turned back to protect its kill, swimming strongly toward the shore. On 267, 268, here the M- sort of serves as a semicolon, but in a less formal measure. What makes this a less formal moment? Well, I guess it's more exciting. It's moving more quickly, so Crichton employs the M- rather than the semicolon because it's less formal, faster paced, and more of a response than an explanation. Exclamations. I couldn't help it, Timmy! Exclamation mark on 266. Now they're literally sitting ducks on a pond as the Tyrannosaur comes towards them and the kids are just screaming at each other and the exclamations accentuate their desperation. Effectively. I couldn't help it! Exclamation mark. Of course you can swim, you little idiot! Exclamation mark. Of course snakes can, you idiot! Exclamation mark. Everybody knows Tyrannosaurs can swim! Exclamation mark. It's in all the books! Exclamation mark. Anyway, all reptiles can swim! Exclamation mark. Grant wants them to settle down, but he's using exclamations too. Hold on to something! And hang on! Exclamation mark. But they exclaim way more. I'm sorry, Dr. Grant! Exclamation. I didn't mean it! Exclamation on 267. Do something! Do something! Lex is wailing, screaming for her life, and Crichton calls her Alexis for a brief moment in here. She's only called Alexis 3 times as far as I can tell in this novel. The first 2 are when she and Tim were first introduced on the tour, and now. I wonder why Crichton slipped it in here at this moment. He's going away on 268 with an exclamation, said by Lex twice, and then she taunts it and calls it a stupid dinosaur with an exclamation mark. Parallelism. She mouthed, no boat. He nodded, yes. Pale with fear, Lex waved back, no. He gestured, yes. On 265. These are all the same setup, and so this sort of represents parallelism. These are all sentences constructed with the same mechanics, simplified way down into their core messaging, because it's frankly all being pantomimed and delivered silently, because they don't want to wake up the Tyrannosaur, right? It's a simple back and forth, and it's really frustrating to read, but it's parallelism done well. Literary techniques. We have metaphors. Grant stabbed in the air with an emphatic finger on 265, using violent imagery, imbuing gravity and consequence into Grant's movements. It adds menace and perhaps aggravation, and it's compelling enough that Lex complies and overcomes her fear to obey Grant. So stabbing with his finger, metaphorically, the stabbing created an image strong enough that Lex complies. And suddenly they heard an answering roar floating across the water toward them on 267, where the roar doesn't fill the air or shake them to their core. It's just another roar coming across the water, which is a good way to describe the smaller, more diminutive juvenile Tyrannosaur, which catches Big Rex's attention. Similarly, the Tyrannosaur yawned lazily and scratched behind its ear with its hind foot, just like a dog on 266. In this simile, we can imagine a dog scratching behind its ear easily, but can we imagine a Tyrannosaur sitting upright under a tree doing this? I mean, a dog does this laying down or propping itself up with its forelegs while it scrubs away behind its ear. This is a strange example for Crichton to use. This isn't a great simile, I don't think. By then it looked like a crocodile, and it swam like a crocodile, swinging its big tail back and forth so the water churned behind it. On 266, we can imagine a crocodile paddling along by its churning tail easily enough, so this is a strong simile, and exactly like a crocodile is what Grant thinks.
All right, a big thanks to you for tuning in. If you're interested in more of the podcast, you can find it wherever podcasts are, and just look for Juras-Sick Park-Cast, include the hyphens, or Jurassic Park Podcast. That might work too. And if you like the videos, you can like and subscribe and receive notifications when a new one is available. There's lots more to come. Until next time.